All right, we're live here with Ian, Grigg,
Hello.
and yeah, I know you said earlier, Ian, that you were kind of coming. You had a cold or something, or you're recovering from, and and it's really late over there. I assume in the London area, or somewhere out there in Europe.
Somewhere in Europe, yeah.
Okay, and so Ian, former Block One, been in this industry for many decades, and kind of the inventor of the recording, or the term recording contract, and many others. He's very notable in the crypto scene, and I'm really excited to have you, Ian. You're always a joy to listen to. And you could feel free to expand on that if you want, and maybe give us a little bit of an update of what you're working on. And then feel free to just let everyone know what you're going to talk about, and just kind of take over, I guess. So.
Sure, okay. I've got, what, 15 minutes? I don't think I'll fill it.
Okay, yeah. Up to 20 is fine. Up to 20. So.
Okay, so what people are mostly interested in is, if you like, the thinking process behind EOS. When Dan was working on Steemit and BitShares, he obviously had a lot of experience about what he was doing, and he had the idea that the next project to work on would be to generalize that model and create a blockchain with dApps, where the dApps were actually flexible. BitShares, it's a specific dApp. Steemit, it's a specific dApp. And the businesses were built around those processes. This time, the notion was to build a generic platform with multiples of these, many of these. And when we started talking about this back in the early days, the thing that struck us was that the blockchain space had not proved itself. It had not brought the institutions in. It had not brought the businesses in. It had not brought the masses in. And the question was why that didn't work out. And I was fresh from working at R3, where we had actually gone through a whole process of working with big institutions on many hundreds of test cases and use cases and so forth. And we still felt in that context that there was this massive disconnect between what the institutions wanted and what blockchain could provide. And our thinking gravitated around a bunch of practical issues. So, for example, we knew that Ethereum was kind of in the space that we were looking at. And we weren't intending to compete directly with Ethereum, but it was kind of the benchmark, if you like. And Ethereum is hard to program. It's hard to get right. It's hard to prove. It's hard to test. It's hard to do everything. So one of the issues there was to come up with a much better design that allowed dApps to be much more easily created. And you can see that in the white paper and the various governance papers and so forth. But another of the big impetuses was that it was now clear to everybody that blockchain was just simply too dangerous for ordinary people. And if we wanted the masses to come in and create a blockchain worthy of the world, we needed to make it safer. And we can do it by a number of mechanisms. You can make blockchain safer if you put the work into the graphical user interfaces and the security modules and all this sort of stuff. And blockchain are working on that, albeit they didn't have it ready when mainnet took off. And that's a shortfall, which has caused ramifications. But that's one of the things that you can work on. You can make the thing safer. But we also, and as we heard in the last session, we also knew that there are always disputes. And if you look at the history of blockchain over the last 10 years, there's been about 10 massive fights which have caused disruption to the blockchains, disruption to the community, and disruption to the very philosophy and beliefs of what people thought. For example, when Ethereum had its DAO issue, which became like the canonical thing we were trying to fix, everybody was saying, if you fork the chain, that is the end of code is law. We all thought code is law, and no, you're not doing this. So even though some small group of people went off with one fork, a lot of people, everybody I talked to, were horrified that they were forking. So why were they forking? And it turns out that they went through a very ad hoc process to resolve the dispute. So you kind of have to back away and say, they had a dispute. they didn't predict that dispute. They kind of sort of maybe did predict parts of it, because the design of the smart contract had a big long staking period in it, which saved them. That's worth remembering. But what they didn't have in process was a way of resolving disputes. And to be frank, they still don't. Although as a side issue, it turns out that they do have an actual dispute resolution clause in their contract, which everybody ignored. So what does all this mean? It's all very complicated. What we wanted to do was to come up with a situation where, for the big, heavy problems that people face, there was a way to resolve these disputes, and hence put in dispute resolution. Now, both Dan and I had quite a bit of experience with arbitration, so this was thought to be an obvious way to go forward. We created the forum, the ECAF forum. We created the rules. We created the constitution. Everybody basically piled in and got things going. Now, of course, we didn't do enough, but we didn't do enough at every level. There wasn't enough code completed in time. There wasn't enough documentation completed in time. We didn't have enough arbitrators. We didn't predict the caseload. There were lots of things that went wrong, but this is the nature of the game. You get out there and you build it and you get it out and done. And to the credit of, I guess, the entire team, it was delivered on the time frame with working components. So moving forward, now we're in a position where we have seen ECAF working in its very slow form for the last, let's see now, we're talking about 5 months. And it's very clear that dispute resolution is a hard problem. It is always a hard problem. People talk about trying to resolve a dispute in, say, 7 days or something. That's not going to happen. It's too hard to do that because of the fact that you need to wait until everybody's had their say. The different parties have got to come up and have their say, and they've got to have time to do that. Limiting people to come back and respond in 2 days is just ridiculous. People don't have that chance. So it is fundamentally the case that if you're using arbitration as a process to resolve disputes, you're going to be facing month-long or 6-month-long processes. So consequently, you're only just now starting to see the first results come out. It's very obvious that we're understaffed. It's everybody's volunteer, and therefore we can only do work as and when we have that availability. But that's kind of the choice that the community has made. So where do we go from there? I think you have to understand that when a contract has been placed into action, that contract has to be respected, or we die in the process. And the Constitution, for better or worse, has placed ECAF into the position of the monopoly provider of dispute resolution. Now, until that contract has changed, until the Constitution has changed, ECAF are in the unfortunate position of having to do a lot of work and get that work done in the best faith that they've got, regardless of the circumstances. So, in a sense, it's simply irrelevant to come along and say, oh, ECAF is unfunded, or ECAF hasn't got the experience, or there aren't enough people, or there aren't enough hours in the day, or whatever. The fact is we have to do it until the Constitution is changed. So let's move forward to that question. We are going to go through a referendum, and the fundamental fight that has been happening over the last 5 months has been the question of whether there should be base layer dispute resolution or not. And the two camps are very opposed. They're separated. There's people on this side and there's people on that side. The people on one side are louder than the other. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are supporters of this notion of base layer arbitration don't want to get involved in repetitive toxic debates. So we have the problem that the discussion isn't really advancing. And this was kind of apparent. This was apparent like 4 months ago or 5 months ago. So we're facing the fact that we have to go to referendum. The question then is, what is that referendum going to do? And it's going to take us into two areas. Either we accept base layer dispute resolution as the fundamental, a fundamental leg of the governance of EOS, or we remove it. And once that is done, we can then face all of the realities of the next questions, of the other questions that arise. So as we go into this process of referendum, that's going to be the core question. And I honestly don't think we can actually get more information out of this particular situation. People are going to vote with their conscience. People are going to vote with their beliefs. They're going to move forward with their current understanding. And consequently, we just have to get through that referendum. We are all hamstrung by that particular problem. And blaming one side or the other isn't helping us, because the elephant in the room is we still haven't got that referendum. Now, it's coming, sure, but the pain keeps going on. So what we really need to do is be very patient and come up with a fairly good definition of a referendum that satisfies a broad community or plurality of the community, that we get this question answered. Now, this leads me on to the next problem. If you look at the work that's being done on constitutions, some of it's pretty good, some of it's a bit, amateur, some of it's a bit wild. Just calling out one thing, the so-called V2 proposal doesn't have any dispute resolution at all. It says that if everybody agrees, we can go to arbitration. But that's actually your right anyway. We can't take that right away from you in a contract. If you agree to resolve your disputes in arbitration, that's what you go and do. That's how it works. So without any dispute resolution there, what we're doing with this V2 constitution proposal is going back to the Ethereum days where there's no proposal. There's nothing worth talking about. So it's going to fall back to the block producers when a big dispute happens, and they will resolve it in an ad hoc fashion. Or, as they are now discussing, they'll come up with an internal process which they'll use. So that then leads to that question. What happens if there is no dispute resolution? Well, unfortunately, there will still be disputes. The block producers are going to have to resolve them. Now, if they get involved and if there's a flood of cases, they're very quickly going to get themselves into the same problem that ECAF has. It's taking too much time, there's too much work, so they're going to have to get together and say, look, how are we going to resolve this? And then they're going to outsource it. They're either going to outsource it to a committee which they create themselves and appoint to do the job, in which case they've just recreated ECAF, or they are going to appoint an external body such as ICC or ICJR or whatever they're called. There's hundreds of these forums out there. There's lots to pick from. And they're going to appoint an external body to do this, in which case all you've done is substituted our internal community process for an external non-community process. And okay, so I think the problem you're going to find is that if you remove dispute resolution, but we acknowledge that there are going to be disputes, we will, in the end, reinvent dispute resolution. It'll either be much like ECAF, in which case you'll have a different set of faces, or it'll be something that might be somewhat different. It might work better. It's obvious that, for example, ICC has a lot of experience in resolving disputes. That's their job. They've been doing it for years, for decades. So they will do a better job in the sense of general disputes. But will they do a better job in the sense of blockchain? That's a question. So, given a bit of discussion, you might actually be able to get them up to speed on that. So that would be a possibility. I didn't have that confidence at the time, but also we had circumstances which made it very difficult to have that conversation at the time. So then the alternative is, if we keep dispute resolution, do we just simply give ECAF the go-ahead, or do we change it? ECAF doesn't mind which way you go. ECAF sits there and waits for the disputes to come in. ECAF isn't running out there trying to get disputes, trying to get control. It simply waits for the disputes. And from ECAF's point of view, if you change over to a different system, or you make a change to ECAF in the Constitution, that's okay too. The job of the dispute resolver is to resolve your disputes, not to tell you how to do your business, but to resolve your dispute where your business is broken down. So ECAF isn't going to fight one way or the other. It's not going to get out there and show leadership and policy and voting and protocol and so forth. It's not going to act like politicians. It's simply up to the community to decide how it's going to do this. So we await how this is going to be, just like everybody else. We await the referendums, just like everybody else. On that note, I'll hand back.
Thanks a lot, Ian. So we have some time for some questions, maybe 5 minutes of questions. So if anybody has any questions for Ian, please on the chat window, or of course you can use the ask a question feature that we have here. So let me see here.
Yeah, I mean, Eve says that there are more ors than those two options. Yes, that's true. I'm simplifying it for the audience. The really big thing is whether we go base layer or not. Now, once you decide to go either way of that fork, then you've got a lot of opportunities opening up. But how deep do you want to go down that rabbit hole?
Rhett made a comment here. Actually, let me see.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that, Rhett. The proxies should start an arbitration body. I mean, anybody can start an arbitration body. The question is, how does the agreement to arbitrate get put into a contract? Because without that agreement up front, you get into a bit of a fight at the end. Once you're in a dispute, everybody fights about everything. As Yetzer said in his video, they will fight about everything, and then you can't really rely on just having an arbitration body, because people will say, one side will say I want it, the other side will therefore oppose and say I don't want it.
All right, Ian. If you go down to the ask a question section,
okay,
there is one.
Got
question.
it. Can you explain the dangers, the why of why ECAF should not and would not seek to inform the community of best practices for policy? Basically, we haven't got the resource to be able to put down all the documentation that we want to. The basic concept in arbitration, or the way it's structured in governance, is that the RDR sets the baseline. But we know that there is more needed, such as what you call best practices or policy or whatever it is. And then, therefore, the RDR mandates that ECAF writes a handbook to put that information in. Now, that handbook does, at this stage, exist in a very starter form, and people are jotting things in, but it's nowhere near complete enough at this point. And it's basically a question of time. We have to have more resource. And while you've got, on one side, practices, we can write dull documents that nobody reads all day, or we can get back to that very important case that we're all tussling over. We're all arguing over a particular case today. Which is more important? We have to make a priority there. So if you like, documentation has taken a back seat. Okay. Do you think the potential for ECAF to receive subsidy has prevented any other DR service to emerge on the chain? You could say that. I think the problem here is that people imagine that we can have an open market in dispute resolution, but that's overshadowed by the fact that most people will not set up dispute resolution properly in the first place. So if we could rely on people to set up their clauses for dispute resolution properly in the first place, then yes, you could have a market, or you could better have a market for dispute resolution forums. But more likely what's going to happen, and this is always our fear, and I think there's plenty of evidence for this out in the world, that a big DApp is going to write its contract to remove the right of dispute resolution from the individuals that are playing. And it'll do this by a bunch of legal techniques. Lawyers know how to kill this situation dead. And consequently, our problem isn't trying to encourage more dispute resolution forums into play. Our problem is trying to encourage everybody to have fair dispute resolution in the first place. So, the fee subsidy thing isn't. I don't see it as being particularly germane. But you're right to bring it up. If a contract erred, which resulted in loss of funds for a user, that ECAF would arbitrate. In what form could the remediation take, off-chain, on-chain? If on-chain through BP executed orders, what would be the source of funds? Okay, so we've burnt the user's tokens, and therefore those tokens aren't there anymore. Now, in the current situation, I would say that an arbitrator, this is a prediction, would be strongly minded to say, well, you've lost your tokens, because he can't magic the tokens out of thin air, and he cannot take the tokens from somebody else unless they're a party, unless there's a reason, a rationale, because otherwise he's breached the other party's rights. So if the tokens have gone, then you're kind of a bit stuck. So absent a magical method to recover those burnt tokens, there's nothing the arbitrator can do to make those tokens. On the other hand, if the block producers were to come back and say, well, those tokens have been burnt, but what we can do is we can run this special blah, blah, blah transaction that recovers exactly those burnt tokens and returns them, then there could be a negotiation there. And if that was reasonable, then the arbitrator could award that. A third possibility is that what we want to do, or in a well-organized arbitration forum, what we should do is have some slice of our funds put into an emergency war chest as an insurance policy. EOS is big enough to do self-insurance. And this is what should be happening with WPS. We should be taking a slice of that, shoving it into a fund somewhere, and then saying, when somebody actually does have this particular problem where, it all mucked up, take the value out of that insurance fund and recover the missing tokens from there. Eve again. Do you think that one of the current issues of the country is that almost nearly 100% of the cases are only one-sided, as in the other party? No, that isn't a problem. There are two sides to the disputes. It's just that we don't know who the other party is, so they don't show up. And if it's a theft, then, we understand what's going on. The thief isn't going to show up. And arbitration is quite capable of dealing with that process. Dispute resolution is quite capable of dealing with that process. And it backs right into the Constitution, because the Constitution defines what the nature of the property rights are. It gives us the ability to say these rights have been breached, therefore we need to recover these funds. We do have one of the cases recently where what has happened is that in a theft, the final party did show up and dispute the situation. So that party, that person has now been added as a party to that case, I think. I'm not sure of the details. And that process of figuring out what to do is being thought about now in that case. But that's somewhat unusual. How are we doing? Oh, question time's over. I'm sorry.
A lot, Ian. Great. There was a lot of questions asked, so feel free to stick around. There are questions, you could put them in the chat window, and yeah, I'm sure they'll be happy to have your answers there. I don't know if there's might be one left on the ask a question section as well, if you want to.
Oh, there's a new one there.
Yeah, so
in
maybe
spirit of Rhett's comment in the channel, I'm surprised that we've not seen. Right. So part of the problem there is that very few people have filed cases against BPs. Although there's been lots of noise, the cases haven't seemed to be filed. There has been a comment that a case was filed quite a while ago against BPs, but for some reason ECAF didn't receive it. I don't know what the story is there. I haven't had a chance to dig. A case has been recently filed against BPs to do with Start EOS. So we shall see, but it's only just been filed in the last week or so.
All right, thanks a lot, Ian. Thanks everyone for great questions. And yeah, I know it's late over there, Ian, so
Super. I'll be up for another hour. I'm a night owl.
Okay, sounds good. All right, sounds good. Thanks so much. A great perspective to listen to, and so we'll feel free to just answer the questions in the chat window, and then we're going to bring Ashe in here real quick. And thanks so much, Ian. We'll see you out in the panels. So, all right, Ashe, if you're ready, I'm going to invite you. Hey, how's it going, Ashe?
Hey, what's up, everyone?
All right, so we got Ashe from FreedomProxy.
Yes, sir.
Long time. Oh, I can hear you. We can see you. And
what up, Eves? What up, Brandon?
So yeah, that's fantastic. And and you did a Chestnut recent. I mean, you're with Chestnut, and
I was with Chestnut. I didn't join the team down in South Africa, but I was on the founding team in London. But unfortunately, they didn't win. But I hope they find some funding, because we need account management tools for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. It's a fascinating project. But long time. Liberty, you do a Liberty podcast,
Liberty Entrepreneurs podcast. That's right.
Yeah, and FreedomProxy is one of.
And I even printed my little thing here in mirror mode, so when I got on it would read correctly. So thinking ahead here.
I think okay, so it might show well on the. For me, it does. It's still flipped.
Oh no! I actually printed it backwards. Oh no! That's hilarious.
No, that's funny. People will pay more attention to it.
I printed it backwards, so I thought it would be the right way. But all right, it flipped last time. I know, and I cut the bottom off. But anyways,
all right. I'll let you kind of expand on your intro, and feel free. You got 15 minutes and 5 minutes Q&A, and I know you've been talking about proxies. So thanks a lot for being here, Ashe.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I'm Ashe Oro. I've been in cryptocurrencies for a long time, and before cryptocurrencies, I was in gold and silver, because I thought that was the way that we free people were going to make it through the upcoming fiat currency collapse and bond bubble and stuff like that. So I was big time into gold and silver. Quit my engineering job to join Peter Schiff's bank back in 2012, and fell in love with cryptocurrencies, and this is the whole thing. It got me to EOS because it's the best opportunity that we have to actually build our freedom. And so I became very, very passionate about EOS after becoming passionate about Steam and BitShares and Dash and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all this stuff. It's just the best opportunity we've got, as long as governance doesn't screw it up. But that said, about a week after the mainnet launch, I decided to start Proxy, because I was familiar with other delegated proof of stake systems, and I understood the importance of proxies, because not a lot of people, and I think I'm speaking to the choir here, but not a lot of people have the time, and it takes a lot of time to research 50, 60, 70 proxies and make sure that not only are they technically proficient, but you share a similar view of the world. You're trying to achieve the things that together that you believe are going to build the type of world that you want to live in. And it's very subjective. Whenever we started FreedomProxy, and I started with my brother Zane, he's actually in the room here with me. But whenever we started FreedomProxy, we wanted it to be very objective as possible. Have everything in your JSON file, your BP JSON file, and we're going to run it through some really smart algorithm, and we're going to judge you based on that. But it doesn't work that way, because value is subjective. And what we started noticing is that the specific topics were just as important to us as, say, your latency. I mean, BPs are the stewards of our blockchain. They're the stewards of the way that we communicate and store our truth and how we exchange value. And so for us, it was, yes, of course, we want technical savvy teams. We want teams that can keep the network up. Absolutely. If the network's down, none of this other stuff matters. Literally none of it matters. So we're looking for teams who are in the test nets, and we're looking for teams testing code, and we're looking for teams that have long-time IT and tech backgrounds, but we're also looking for teams who don't mind expressing themselves and don't mind creating content and go to conferences and network so that we can actually get to know you, not just your online you, because sometimes those are different. We'll see how genuine you are, see where you're passionate, and see if we think what you're building is in line with the vision that we have that we want to see built. And so we created FreedomProxy. It just happens to be 12 characters. I'm still super proud of that. But we basically stand for one main thing, and that's building freedom. And that's where we hang our hats on. And it brings me to the point of why proxies are important. And there's talk these days about there's so many people upset about exchange voting, and I get it. It makes or breaks BPs, and as a BP, your business model rests if you're only a BP. And if you're at Tulip, I warned everyone about having a singular business model of block production, trying to get the rewards and not building other profitable enterprises around that. But if you don't have other profitable enterprises and you're just a BP, you succumb to the whims of the voters. And this is, as a business owner, this is scary. And that's why a lot of people don't like the proxies for exchanges. And the idea is that we're just going to, this is a problem. We're going to end all proxies. Well, I mean, you would really have to fundamentally change delegated proof of stake for that to happen. But is it really that easy? If we ended all proxies, is it really that easy? Will we get rid of these bad actors? What some people consider bad actors. Some people consider bad actors. And let's break this down fundamentally. You're a token holder on EOS. That gives you certain rights. And I don't like using the word rights because we all have stupid governments and they've distorted the word right, where we almost think that governments give us rights, which is obviously not true. They can only take away rights. But there are implied rights as an EOS token holder. And one of those rights is to stake and receive network resources and use the network. Another right is your right to vote for whoever in the hell you want to vote for. Or you can delegate your right to vote to a proxy. Well, there's no force in that. You're not breaking any rules here. This isn't a force-based system. You're basically saying, I have the ability to do this with my tokens. Exactly. I have the ability to do this with my tokens. I now give you the rights to use my tokens in this way. And at any time, if I don't agree with you, I'm going to pull those rights back and I'm going to reclaim those rights. And I bring this up because it's very fundamental. If anyone is telling you that you should not vote for a certain BP or that you cannot vote for a certain BP, they are literally trying to remove or restrict your right to vote. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. Proxies aren't the problem. Proxies are just a delegation of the responsibility of voting, the right to vote. But, I bring this up because we've got this whole Start EOS shenanigans going on right now. And I'm studying both sides of this. And, as proxies, we look at this stuff and we're like, okay, back in the day, I think EOS Nation voted, they expressed that they wanted to fund ECAF, which I think is a terrible idea. And so we unvoted them because we didn't believe in this vision of EOS. Recently, I asked one BP what their stance was on Start EOS. And as a token holder specifically, and yes, as a proxy secondarily, I'm interested in, I almost felt bad. Should I vote for these people? Am I bad? Well, I have the right to vote for whoever I want to. And what's really stopping? Who should be able to tell us who we should or shouldn't vote for? Should it be this semi-arbitrary constitution that tries to limit our right to vote for whomever we want to? And so it's got me really thinking these days. And I know this isn't much about proxies, but it's really got me thinking about this whole structure of voting and how significant it actually is. And is it only beneficial if we restrict it in certain ways? Or is it more beneficial if we allow people to vote any possible way they want? Right. And I don't know. This is a conversation that I hope we start having. And the first instance here is start EOS. Yeah, welcome to governments for sure. I mean, this is the important that we have to ask the questions. And a lot of people are like, no, this is vote buying. We should never allow this. It's been proven like this is going to destroy our blockchain. And other people, and I'm starting to put myself in this camp, is like, no, let's vote for whoever we want. And let's let the marketplace of profit and that feedback loop really have a chance to take hold before we try to stamp it out. And let's analyze this stuff. And it's been very interesting. And we've actually lost votes on FreedomProxy, and then we've gained votes on FreedomProxy because of our continued curiosity to be willing to hear both sides of the story here. And I've invited, and they've accepted, I've invited Start EOS to come on next week, Tuesday night, Eastern Standard Time, to hear their side of the story, because I really worry that people stay so involved in this governance stuff. And listen, I'm not discounting governance in and of itself. Hey, Martin, I'm discounting the importance that people are placing on governance and voting in general right now, as we're trying to get our first cash flowing profitable businesses built on EOS. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have companies creating wealth, value, capital, cash flowing, paying payrolls, paying these dividends out to the community, and actually having an economy that's more than just a bunch of random arbitrary tokens floating around, that's what killed Ethereum. They didn't have any businesses. Nobody could make a profit on them. It wasn't because of their governance. It was because of their technical stuff. But I am focused as an entrepreneur and as a co-founder of FreedomProxy. I'm looking to support BPs who are making a profit. And this is becoming, for me personally, I'm not speaking for Zane, but for me, I want to support block producers that are thinking outside of the box and not just dependent on inflation payouts, block producer rewards payouts as their income. Because, yeah, for sure, fees and transaction fees, it was terrible. But I'm interested in block producers who are more entrepreneurial focused. And I'm not saying that you don't need to be an entrepreneur to just create a block producer. You obviously do. You got to set up the IT. You got to have some sort of public relations. You got to have some sort of marketing. You've got to have some legal. You got to have payroll. It's very entrepreneurial. But like Dan said, and a lot of people got pissed off at this, but a lot of people need to get pissed off that you need to have other opportunities to help you cash flow businesses. And it's coming to a close now that we actually do have other entrepreneurial adventures making money on EOS. I believe we're going to start depending less and less on the free goodies that block producers create for the community, and more so on, if specializing in block production, and if you have an idea of something you can give back, create a little business around it. Create a business around it and sell it to us. Because, if you're just creating free stuff and giving it to us, we don't necessarily know that it's valuable. But I guarantee you that the market feedback loop of profit and loss tells us exactly what's valuable and what the community sees as valuable. If ECAF is actually valuable on the base layer, then people will fund it and people will use it and people will pay for it. And it doesn't need any inflation or WPS whatsoever. These are the types of businesses we want to attract on EOS. This is what makes us strong. And for me, as a proxy owner, I prefer to have businesses making profit, not asking for handouts. And those are the types of block producers that I want to support. But anyways, I won't preach anymore. Hey, Elam, I'll open it up for any types of questions you guys have. This is from Rhett from EOS Amsterdam. Thanks, Rhett. In my opinion, watchdogs and proxies should file ECAF cases regarding BPs. What is your opinion? So I want to remove the language ECAF. I just want to stop using it because, with all respect, they are not a monopoly. That is absurd that they even think that they're a monopoly on a justice of any sort. So let's just call this arbitration. Oh, Look at that, an edit function. Yeah, I think proxies would be a great avenue to file disputes against block producers. I think that could be a large part of what a proxy does. We're the ones paying attention to all this stuff. If you, the user, for whatever reason, or you, the DApp owner, for whatever reason, have a problem with what a block producer has done, it seems fairly natural for proxies to start assisting in that type of arbitration against block producers. But I mean, I don't have a legal background. I only a man with a lot of opinions. Vote buying has broken governance on most delegated proof of stake chains in the past. So how do we keep it from repeating past mistakes? Good question, John. We're also different. You know, there are also, it wasn't just straight up vote buying on other chains. I'm assuming you mean like Lisk or something. There were other issues, and I don't have time to get in the technicals, and I don't know all the technicals, but it wasn't just vote buying. There were like some weird cartel things that formed, and they didn't have the same type of governance that we did, or it was strange. So we need to study this stuff. And if a simple bout of initial vote buying can destroy EOS, then EOS needs to be destroyed, and we will start all over. And another thing about vote buying is, how the hell do you catch it? How do you enforce it? Like, what is it? Is this the war on vote buying, kind of like the war on drugs? I mean, or what are we doing here? Right? Let's allow people to voluntarily express themselves, be rewarded, and vote with their conscience. And if you don't believe in vote buying, or whatever we want to call it, vote incentivization, then come out strongly with your BP and say, we don't do this. These guys do this. We don't do this. We're more moral, whatever. Vote for us. Right? Ostracization, I believe, is how we actually reduce what we consider as negative vote buying. We don't do it by giving a couple old guys the permission to come with a hammer and just start smacking everyone, right? No, we let this happen, and we see what incentivizations creep up. This is just me. I don't speak for FreedomProxy right now. I'm not speaking for Zane. I'm speaking for Ashe. But like, let's see this, and maybe it actually creates value. You know, I'm going to have Start EOS on my show, EOS.radio, next week on Wednesday morning, Asia time. And we're going to talk about this stuff because they see it as they're creating value for the community. Some in the West see it as they're literally destroying EOS. So it's going to be a good conversation. And if we try to stop vote buying, it turns everybody into a little snitch. Like, oh my God, did you hear that? Blah, blah, blah. So, no, do you have any proof? I heard it from someone. Okay, well, what do we do? All right, you can't stop this. It's unenforceable. We need to get realistic. Those that think we can actually stop vote buying need to go study the government's war on drugs and understand that it was never actually a war on drugs. It was a war of control for the government. My Google must be getting excited. She's starting to talk to me. All right. The history of democracy and voting tends to show that proxy voting tends to concentrate power into limited groups like parties. How do proxies? What? Your Google went off as well? Whoa, what did I say? That's crazy. It concentrates power into limited groups like parties. How do proxies, or the idea of proxies, intend to keep the power decentralized? You know, it's another good question here. So it's all voluntary, first off. If you don't believe in the proxy, this isn't like a political party. We can have as many proxies as we want on EOS. Yes, we have seen that over time, proxies, or political parties, if you will, do get concentrated, and they even switch names sometimes. You know, like the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States, they actually switched names in the past, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I think a voluntary voting system may be different, and we're going to see this, but because there's a marketplace for proxy trust. Unlike in the real world or the traditional world, nobody can really just create their own voting party, and you can't just political party, and you're not going to get. I mean, anybody follow libertarianism, the Libertarian Party, or the Green Party, you know. You don't get the stage, the system's built, so you can't even compete. I think we have a much more free market in competition in the power that proxies will have. And you can substitute proxy for political party if you want, because at the end of the day, we're trying to align our interest with the people in the system that see our values and see us eye to eye. What proxies can't do is just keep that monopoly control, because at any time another proxy can come up and create their business. And let's say FreedomProxy votes for something really fucking stupid and you don't like it, and you think it's literally obnoxious and we're destroying the network. Go and create your own proxy and literally call us out for what you think we're doing. And let's let the marketplace of opinion decide who people side with. Do you have any thoughts about how to monetize proxy services in a way that encourages proxy influence? You know, that's a good question, Brandon. I literally haven't even thought about monetizing the proxy. I don't know how I would do it. Proxy buying. Yeah, there we go. Maybe we're the ones buying the votes. But, you know, for me, a proxy is a platform, and just like Liberty Entrepreneurs. I never had any thoughts about monetizing a platform like that. But I'm sure somebody will monetize a proxy, and I want proxies to be able to be monetized. And maybe if I see a really awesome voluntary free market business model that monetizes the proxy, maybe I do. You know, I mean, we get to the point where, what if BPs create their own tokens? What if sister companies of BPs create their own token? Yeah, what if a BP creates Shintai? What if a proxy creates their own token? You know, the idea of making this stuff illegal is that the good guys aren't going to do it. And then what's going to be seen as the bad guys are still going to do it because they want to do it. And so I think that if we open it up, sure, okay, I'll finish here. I think if we open it up to allowing anybody to do this, then I think it's actually going to be more fair and more competitive than what we're thinking right now. But thanks for everyone for tuning in, and sorry if I've offended anyone.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ash. Thanks for all the great questions as well out there in the audience, and really appreciate it. Look forward to more updates from your proxy. And yeah, if you're a BP, definitely go reach out to Ash. So
no poem read. I'm sorry.
So all right, sounds good, Ash. And yeah, really appreciate it. We'll see you out there on Telegram. And
yeah, thank you.
And take care. And yeah, you know, we're you know, there's, with these conferences, there's always delays, you know, and we've kind of pushed things back. And this one was, we had a section here that we were going to discuss version 2 of the Constitution, but since we're kind of getting close to the hour, we might just save some time and just skip this V2 conversation. I was actually going to try to get the audience to participate and discuss version 2. One thing I'll note, it is a very popular option, I think, for people, version 2, because, you know, Dan Larimer is kind of the chief architect of EOS, and, you know, Block 1 also, after Dan wrote his blog, they actually came out with an official version of a constitution that they support. This was back in June, but so it's a little bit dated, but I think my assumption is that they're still you know, fully supportive of it. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. I'll just at least put because sometimes we forget when, especially when Block 1 and Dan, you know, they can't be so I guess public with their influence. And so I think, you know, they're not part of, they're not active in the discussions, but I do think they have some very good ideas, and we should really dig into what they say. And so I'm going to put this version 2 Constitution in the link below. It's you know, it's just Google Block.1 Constitution, and you'll probably find it. I know Rhett says there's too many flaws, but, you know, and they're not here to be able to address anything. But what I do say is really look at the design principles. You don't have to actually go to the details of reading the Constitution, but they're their introduction. And if you, maybe I should just screen share real quick just over that page. I do just encourage everyone to just take a look at it. So let me screen share real quick. So this is the Constitution. If you guys can see, just, you know, look at it, just read it, you know, just the sections. The importance of code is law, recording contracts and enforcing subjective terms. That's another heading. A need for objective boundaries, lost and stolen keys, which is a large part of what people want arbitration for, or at least some kind of dispute resolution, or just protection, really. How to enforce arbitration orders for stolen private keys. A lot of great information, and then they go into the Constitution. But I encourage everybody, because we kind of skip ahead too far, I think, without kind of sitting back and just rereading this multiple times and trying to understand, getting back to kind of what their main points are about why they shifted their thinking, or at least Dan and Block One, about what governance means. So I encourage people to do that, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I wish we could have had a longer discussion, but I think it's a great place to save some time here and you know, continue on with the next session here, if no one objects. So again, take a look at it. I do think, you know, just it is a popular option, I think, just in general. I mean, most people who aren't paying attention probably just, oh, I still think this is the default. It's just my, you know, my guess and a speculation right now. But anyways, so that's my comment there. But you know, we'll take a few minute break. I got to kind of exercise a little here, stretch out, but we'll be probably in a few minutes. We'll go and start the next session. So just, you know, sit tight, just relax, maybe stretch a little bit, and we'll continue this in the next session. So thanks a lot, guys.